Everybody, my name's Emma O'Connor and I'm doing my presentation on healthcare then versus present day healthcare now. Alright, so the ultimate goal in this is to kind of see how has healthcare changed from the 1950s to present day healthcare today. Alright, so this is the first article that I got. It is called Reynolds Hits Jim Crow in Medical Care. Commissioner addresses Queen's group on Negro, his health, government. It is found in the New York Amsterdam News, and this article came out in 1946. So basically, going through this article, the commissioner of the Queen's group, who is Negro himself, addressed the government kind of on the insufficient funds that the African American people were having during this time. Basically, there was a lot of inadequate medical facilities for African Americans and other groups during this time. If you look to the left, this is going to be a little clip from the article itself. It says, hits racial bias, asserting that the vicious racial discrimination, which is the national policy, has hit the Negro hard in its efforts to get health care. And that, for this reason, has a double responsibility is imposed upon Negro medical and nursing groups. So basically, it's saying here that they are still having this discrimination back then and they want change. So, going further, just in this little quotation, it says, on the one hand, he said, they must provide expert care for the sick and the afflicted with the tools and experience that they have, yet at the same time, they must provide the leadership that will shatter the bars of discrimination and clear the path for building better bodies and better lives for their people as well as for the rest of the population. So basically, they're asking for equality, not just in general for the population, but especially in healthcare, because obviously the African American people, along with everybody else, should be able to have healthcare available to them. Something that I also found in this that was interesting was that it said that white were surviving, African Americans were dying. So basically, there were studies and the data shows that the white were living longer. It actually says that the African Americans were expected to die about 10 to 12 years before the whites, whom were born at the same time. So that's just very shocking. And at this time, though, the African Americans were still staying strong for their country, which was obviously brave. And then one more little quote that I pulled, just so you guys can kind of see how the article was. It says, it is indeed probable, he said, quote, that much of the strife and suspicion that inflict the world today is due almost wholly to the frustration and suffering of a people who are sick both in mind and in body. So this was kind of interesting. It's basically saying, like, we're not only actually sick right now, we are, they're struggling with this as a whole. And then biased, it is biased. Although I do agree with this, it is biased. It is an African American writing it on African American rights. So therefore, it is biased. All right, going into the second article I pulled from the New York Times in 1945. It is named Widened Definition of Human Rights. Higher living standards in healthcare are added by social committee. So this one was, like I said, in the New York Times. It was 1 year before the previous article. It basically is bulleting a couple different things that the people as a whole want to change. To the left, I pulled another clip just so you guys could kind of see how it was. How the article looked itself. Number one, it says imposing an obligation upon the member nations to, quote, observe as well as, quote, respect human rights and fundamental freedoms without distinction as to race, language, religion, or sex. So this one actually kind of does have some similarities as the previous one. And this one is not written by an African American. So clearly it's not just them who as a whole believe that there should be health care. It's everybody, actually. And they're trying to do it without discrimination. So as to race, language, religion, or sex. The second bullet point in the article that they stated that they wanted to change was adding higher standards of living and full employment as goals of the United Nations organization in the economic field. So basically, that's obviously something that is still going on today. You can always wish that we have higher standards of living, and there's obviously some people who still live in poverty and cannot access this kind of healthcare and can't just go to a doctor's appointment for, a $25 copay or something along the lines of that. There's still obviously a lot of struggles that people are dealing with today. And then the third one is going to be adding problems of health to those of economic, social, and cultural problems, which the organization should attempt to solve through its Economic and Social Council. So basically, even though this was a year before the past article, it is saying that the economic, social, and cultural problems need to change, and they need to solve through this council. They need to do better, basically. They want these peaceful, and friendly relations among the nations. They're demanding respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms as well. I don't necessarily believe that this one is biased, just because it's basically just saying kind of just what everyone is thinking. It's kind of more so for everybody. It says like the widened definition of human rights. It's not just about the whites or African Americans, so I wouldn't necessarily say this is biased. All right, and then before we go on to the last article of present day, how have things changed in healthcare from the 1950s until now? Okay, so this is going to be my last article, Healthcare in 2021, 5 Trends to Watch. I pulled this from an online article, that's the title. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of different topics that we could talk about today in healthcare. Obviously, 2020 and 2021, it's going to be COVID-19. But not just COVID-19. There's so many different things that have changed throughout the years. After 1950, obviously a big one to talk about is Medicare for all. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions about this, and in this article, it kind of spoke about that. That's something that it's very hard nowadays because a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. So some people just might be for it, some people are not, and it goes a lot deeper than that. It's the funding, where are we going to get the money from? Do we make this accessible to everybody or not? Like I kind of talked about before, COVID-19, obviously this is a very big topic in healthcare right now. Basically the whole entire world is watching everybody else to see how they're handling the situation, and it has sprung up a lot of new ways in which we go about our life. So telehealth is another topic that was widely talked about in this article. Telehealth is basically where you can access your doctor's appointments or fill out prescription refills, anything along the lines of that. Also, therapy, things like that online. So that is something that they talked about in the article that's probably not going to go away. People are still probably going to choose telehealth sometimes over actually going to the doctor. So that's something that has completely changed in healthcare in 2020, in 2021. Another bullet point that they talked about a lot in this article that I found really interesting was maternal health in connection with the mortality rates. So these next 2 quotes that I pulled from the article were about the maternal health. It says, but racial disparities are perhaps the most glaring. As Black women are 39% more likely than whites to experience a severe event that can lead to mortality. So even today, which is, 70 or so years ago, we're still dealing with these issues. Whether, obviously they're not as big as they used to be in the 50s, but it's still going on. And another quote was, going forward, we do need to think more expansively about how to provide healthcare services to women of all races and ethnicities before pregnancy, and how we continue to care for them after they give birth. So this is just very, very interesting to read, that we are still dealing with these racial discriminations, and that some women are not receiving the same amount of care as other women. And I put that this is not biased. This is factual information, all in this article. Okay, so just going to quickly compare the articles. Similarities, differences, and I kind of already talked about if they were biased or not. So similarities, I would say the first two articles were definitely similar since they were dated only 1 year apart, and they talked about a lot of African American issues. So in that way, those two were probably the most similar, but if I had to compare all of the three, I would say that they are still similar because there is still discrimination going on and there's still issues with healthcare today. It's not solved by any means. So those are definitely the reasons that they're similar. Differences, yes, the first one I did think was a little bit biased. The second one and the third, not so much, but all of them did have factual information. So yeah, these are the citations, and this is going to be the end of my presentation. Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it.